No podemos que se pierda esta cultura, la tradición, porque con eso nos identificamos como Yoreme Mayo de Sinaloa, de México. Y los antepasados nos dejaron esto para que siguiera. Así como nos enseñaron a nosotros, estamos enseñando a las nuevas generaciones, para que esto siga para adelante, que no se pierda. Es muy bonito. For hundreds of years, the Yoreme Mayo, an indigenous group from Mexico, have inhabited the lands and rivers of what today is known as the states of Sonora and Sinaloa. It was not until the 16th century that the life of the Yoreme would be interrupted with the arrival of the Spanish and Jesuit missionaries. From the moment the Spanish set foot in Mexico, indigenous peoples have been subjected to abide by colonial governments, which have resulted in irreversible damages. Growing up, it was rare for me to hear about indigenous culture despite being raised in a Mexican household. It would not be until I took a Chicano course in college that I came to understand how deeply rooted Mexican culture is in indigenous culture. So, why is it that it is often so ignored, and why are indigenous peoples perceived as less than? Is their culture not as important as any other culture? Why do we keep ignoring the injustices that occur against indigenous peoples? Hi, my name is Brizeida Alvarez, and I am a fourth-year undergraduate student at UCLA. I wanted to make this video to share with you one of the many stories of the Yoreme and highlight their culture that has existed for generations and continues to thrive today. In this video, I aim to explain the important role cultural identity plays in overcoming obstacles among the indigenous group, the Yoreme Mayo, in northern Sinaloa, Mexico. During the summer of 2023, I had the opportunity to conduct fieldwork in my father's hometown, El Fuerte, Sinaloa. For 2 months, I went to a small community located a few miles outside of town, where I conducted semi-structured interviews and participant observation as a form of answering 2 questions. 1. What are the current challenges the Yoreme are facing within their community? And 2. What is the Yoreme's response to these challenges? While the Yoreme faced multiple challenges, the one issue that continuously came up when talking to people in the community was the involvement of Mexican political parties in local elections in which only the Yoreme can partake in. Now, you may be wondering, why is this an issue? Let me explain. The involvement of political parties in Yoreme elections is prohibited. This becomes problematic because when Mexican political parties get involved, it limits the Yoreme's autonomy and takes away their power to govern their own communities. As these political parties attempt to gain control, it becomes even more difficult for the Yoreme to conserve their cultural practices. As a result, the presence of these political parties is a form of settler colonialism and capitalism. According to Speed, settler colonialism and capitalism is a dual process that continuously seeks to dispossess and exploit indigenous peoples to prioritize the capitalistic needs of the settlers. In this case, the settlers are the Mexican political parties who try to reinforce their power and disregard the Yoreme's needs. Now, that brings me to my second question. What is the Yoreme's response to this presence of settler colonialism in their community? Let me begin by telling you a story. In indigenous oral tradition, a story signifies connection and is indispensable to indigenous cultural sustainability. In this video, I have chosen to tell you about Don Antonio's and Lucia's experiences as stories, as they have both allowed us to learn about their life and their culture. Don Antonio is one of the elders of the community, and at 85 years old, Don Antonio remains a strong participant in cultural practices and events that take place outside and within the community. For many years now, he has participated as a musician in fiestas tradicionales, which are religious celebrations, and Lucia is a 44-year-old woman and is also very involved in Yoreme cultural events, as her mother, Doña Candela, has previously held an important role within the community as a traditional governor, also known as a gobernara. During my time spent with Don Antonio and Lucia, both of them stressed the importance of cultural continuity. This idea is best expressed by Lucia, who says in a soft tone, "No las dejamos porque nuestros abuelos nos enseñaron a que fuéramos enseñando las costumbres y las tradiciones a los niños, generación tras generación, para que no se perdiera." Don Antonio also expresses the same feeling as he says, "Llega a faltar uno pues, y ahí se acaba si no enseñas a los demás, las nuevas generaciones. Por eso pues nosotros seguimos enseñando a los plebes." The connection Don Antonio and Lucia maintain with their culture can be seen in a fiesta tradicional I was invited to on August 15th, better known as a velación. Throughout the year, the Yoreme have fiestas and velaciones that represent a mixture of Catholic and pre-Hispanic practices. Specifically, a fiesta lasts multiple days, whereas a velación is a one-day event. Nonetheless, both fiestas tradicionales are based on the Catholic calendar, where the Yoreme celebrate a saint, based on the day. During the evening on August 15th, the Yoreme community came together to celebrate the Virgen Maria, the Virgin Mary, where both Don Antonio and Lucia participated along with many other members of the community. In a room filled with women, men, and children, Don Antonio in his white shirt, dark blue jeans, and a red bandana tied around his neck, with a sombrero on his head, sat on one knee. On his left and right side, Don Antonio was accompanied by his 2 grandchildren. All 3 were getting ready to participate in the velación as musicians. Throughout the night, Don Antonio participated by singing in the language Yonemnoki and playing an instrument known as a herukia, alongside his 2 grandchildren. Although the 2 grandchildren did not speak Yonemnoki, one grandchild played the herukiam and the other a gourd that acted as a drum, both accompanying their grandfather as they sang together. It is moments like this that demonstrate the way Don Antonio, as an elder and a grandfather, has ensured to share his knowledge with his grandchildren as a means to ensure cultural continuity. By teaching his grandchildren how to play instruments and sing in Yonemnoki, he is able to ensure that cultural practices continue on with future generations, while for the grandchildren, their participation becomes a form of honoring the ancestors and maintaining a spiritual relationship with their cosmic worldview of Huya'anya, which represents a relational coexistence between the mountain and all living beings as they sing songs. Similarly, Lucia's participation in the velación as one of the cocineras, or cooks, demonstrates her important role during the velación as she takes the responsibility of preparing and serving food to the community. During midday, I watched and helped Lucia prepare guacabaqui, which is a beef stew with beans, for the velación. Usually, food for the fiestas tradicionales is made at the centro ceremonial, the location where the velación takes place. However, this time the food was prepared in Lucia's home. Nevertheless, the outdoor kitchen still serves as an important space as it becomes a female-dominated domain, where Lucia was able to take charge and make this space her own. It is also within this space that Lucia has gained generational knowledge of food waste through previous women in her life, such as her mother, who have taught her how to cook Yoreme cuisine.
Para el agua pinole se cuece bien, se dora. Está bueno.
In this way, food becomes more than a means of nutrition, as recipes are templates on which to overlay local, historical, and cultural inflections, and consuming food becomes an embodied, concrete, practical experience of the past. Therefore, as Lucia served members of the community food during the velación, they too were connecting with the ancestors as they ate Yoreme cuisine. Through their actions, Don Antonio and Lucia both have taken charge within their community to ensure the continuity of their culture during challenging times when Mexican political parties tried to control Yoreme communities and minimize their autonomy over their own culture and community. As Don Antonio passes on traditional knowledge to his grandchildren, and Lucia uses her cultural knowledge to give back to the community, their time, dedication, and most importantly, the spiritual connection through everyday cultural activities, such as participating in vigils and cooking, become acts of resistance. These practices counter the presence of settlers, specifically Mexican political parties, who continually seek to gain authority over indigenous communities and dispossess them of their culture. I argue that as a form of navigating the presence of settler colonialism in their community, the Yoreme negotiate their identity by reclaiming and revitalizing their cultural heritage through their participation in cultural practices and through the passing of traditional knowledge onto the next generation. I argue that the Yoreme's everyday practices of cultural expression act as a form of resistance against the presence of settler colonialism and minimizes the control the political structures of power have over the Yoreme by using cultural identity as a strategic tool. Through Don Antonio and Lucia, we are able to see how cultural identity becomes an important tool as they both participate in everyday practices as a means of expressing their Yoreme identity. Given the cultural loss and discrimination that indigenous peoples have faced and continue to face under colonial governments, traditional knowledge has often been marginalized, with stereotypes about indigenous peoples overshadowing the richness of their culture. For this reason, the recovery of traditional knowledge is crucial, as it challenges colonial institutions and allows the Yoreme to reconnect with the spiritual ways of their ancestors. Traditional knowledge also serves as a form of cultural secrecy, as historically, knowledge systems have been passed down from eldest to youngest. This secrecy becomes highly important in the presence of yoris, as a yori is someone who does not respect the tradition. The presence of the yori is unavoidable, as most yoris live in Yoreme communities and attend the Yoremes fiestas. Despite yoris being able to attend the Yoremes fiestas and relaciones, limited knowledge is shared with them, as yoris lack the full understanding and significance of the usos y costumbres, and oftentimes can be disruptive during these cultural events. Given the presence of yoris, cultural secrecy becomes a highly important form of keeping their usos y costumbres behind closed doors and away from the public as a way to ensure cultural continuity. It is important that we recognize the obstacles that Indigenous peoples face every day as they continue to live in settler states where their rights to their land as original occupants and traditions are ignored. Since the arrival of the settlers, Indigenous peoples have been resisting, and today it continues, as the Yoreme's cultural identity and everyday cultural practices are a powerful form of resistance. By sharing with you the stories of Don Antonio and Lucia, I hope to have shown you how valuable and important their usos y costumbres are for them both as Yoreme.